should be okay. If it's not, then we might have a situation where we won't get Ableton audio or something, but at least you'll hear me talk, so that's something. Okay. Well, today, just let me check something because I was heavily interrupted today when I was at TAFE doing my notes. Yeah, there's still a lot of things missing. So the notes for today's subject are not 100% live. They will be, you need to give me a day to finish this because, yeah, I always rewrite my notes. And yeah, I don't like using the same notes every semester, so I always rewrite them. And the notes for today's subject aren't in your content yet, okay? But they will be. So you're seeing a bit of it, and then yeah, all of it will be up by the end of this week, hopefully. Crazy, crazy. Anyway, let me share my screen so you can see some of it. And we're going to go and have a look at why is it not sharing? There we go. Cool. All right. So the topic we're doing today is called multi-sampling. So we're going back to sampling, which is the thing we started with this entire course. Yeah. But to this point, what we've been doing is doing like a very basic form of sampling. We used Ableton Simpler, and obviously by the association with the name Simpler, that gives you a clue that this device is meant to be a more lean, mean version of the full sampler. So has anyone here played with Ableton Sampler, just so I know? And not Simpler, obviously. Has anyone played with Ableton Sampler? Just thumbs down if you don't know, if you haven't yet. Yeah, no. I don't know actually. Let me see. React. Oh, may just laugh at me. Just go laugh if you, yeah, if you haven't used Ableton Sampler. Yeah. So Jackson and Kieran, you played with Ableton Sampler? No, 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 no. Okay, cool. So yes, lurking within Ableton is a very powerful sampler. Okay, so something that essentially allows us to do even more than before. Now, here's just looking at the screen here. You can see me. I got some fancy pictures of hardware, and these are legendary samplers, right? But I'm not going to tell you about each one because literally there's no benefit to you to knowing about it, because even though some people like see these as holy grails, they're not that special if you actually realize what's going on. For example, the only thing that makes them special is the fact that they were the first. They were the first few tools that allowed people to make music without having to hire a studio and a session musician, right? You could just take recordings and turn them into pieces of music. We've done that with Ableton Simpler, but not really, because we're using a simpler track, a single element, and we're using multiple simplers to make elements of a track, right? So you use simpler to make, together with me, of course, and with your own discoveries. You can make drum sounds, you can make pad sounds, lead sounds, you can make weird vocal chops, you can do little things with that. But on a sampler, a full-blown sampler, you can make a whole song. And the method to do so, and the reason why it's possible, is because they can host multiple samples. And that sounds a bit stupid to say, but it's true. So, for example, like the very sought after SP1200 by Emu, they only had 8 tracks, so to speak, 8 samples. The Akai original MPC 60 can hold a bit more. You could hold, I believe it was A, B, C, D times 16. So 3 times 16, 48 at that time, 48 tracks maximum, but limited voice count. So you can only hear a few at a time. So yeah, limited technology then, but we have a way more powerful version of this inside Ableton, provided you have Ableton Suite, because this Ableton sampler only shows up in Ableton Suite. I'm going to take a little side step as well. Ableton sampler is very strong, very powerful, very flexible. Even though it's got some old school kind of methodologies behind it. But really, in the scheme of things, the most powerful multi-sampler and the most well-regarded multi-sampler in the industry right now is still, drum roll please, Native Instruments Contact. Now, does anyone here use that? Contact sounds, Contact libraries. Got the machine. So you got access to some of the Contact sounds, yeah? Especially now with the new version 3, am I correct? Yep. So with the latest machine software update, you can run Contact even on the standalone systems. Last time I checked, this was news literally weeks ago. So yeah, good times to be a machine user. But if you got the machine controller, you could use Contact already. So Jackson, you're on the Contact. How about Rose and Kieran? Do you know of or have used Contact before? Good, that's good. I'd rather you be in that situation, trust me. Kieran, what were you going to say? Mm-hmm. Yep, because it's hard to install, right? Plus it's big. Big libraries, yeah. So no, it's virtual. What Jackson was using is a another platform by the same company called Machine, and it's hardware-ish, yeah, and and no. That's it's understandable. It's a weird name, but I suppose it's got Native Instruments being a Berlin-based company. It's technically Machine, but yeah, it's essentially it started off as a controller, and what I was alluding to was they made one that's no computer required. So essentially a modern day MPC, and it's an interesting platform. I have a lot of love for Machine. I made my first album using this platform. I think it's fantastic, but yeah, they're a weird company now, Native Instruments. But anyway, we're not talking about Machina. We're talking adjacent to Machina. We're talking about Contact. So to explain quickly, Contact is a very powerful multi-sampler. This is its true view. But I'm sure Jackson can attest to you, he's never seen this before, right? That's right, because typically when you use a Contact thing, you see something like this. Like, does that seem familiar, Jackson? Oh, you haven't really used it? Good. If you getting the sense of my tone, I'm not a big fan of it. But I'll tell you why as well, because I'm only not a fan of it for a very dumb reason. Okay, so it might be very valid to you. So Contact looks interesting because it looks like it's got multiple faces. It looks super new and advanced, and it also looks super 2000s, over the top complex. No, nothing to do with music at all to it, right? Because that's what it is. A sampler, if you look at it, it's just a program and that does a lot of things. And maybe there's some things you recognize, like modulators. You might be like, oh, yeah, Dave said what modulators are. So I assume envelopes and LFOs are there. And if you thought that, even though I kind of made you think that, then you're right. And there's effects and there's all sorts. So Contact, and the reason why I wanted to bring it up is because Contact is very legitimate if you want to be a composer, a a composer for screen, for film, for video games, because You get jobs where you have deadlines, and you get jobs where it entails you to use orchestral sounds, choir voices, strings, brass, guitars, that kind of thing. Because really, if you think about it, ever since I started talking about synths with everyone here, did I mention anything about guitars or pianos, those type of sounds? No, right? Laugh. Use your laughter to say no. So yeah, like it's. I haven't, right? Because synths are synths. They're super versatile. They make a lot of sounds, but they're synths at the end of the day. They're electronic tones. We can't get an authentic piano sound. There's no way, no way, no way at all until next week when I tell you there's some way. There's no way with classic analog synths or even digital synths to this point together to create pianos, acoustic drums, um, orchestral sounds, that kind of thing. There's just no way. There's one way, and it's not to use a synthesizer. The only way to do it to this point is to use samples, right? So I want to remind you, if you like the idea of becoming a composer for film and video games and TV, and you in that instance you'll need to have access to good string sounds, I need you to remember that you're using samples, and that's not a bad thing. That's the only way to get authentic, recordings of acoustic drums, strings, brass. Okay. Yes, Rose. If you only want real instrument sounds, then multi-samples is what you need. And luckily for us in Ableton, provided you have Suite, Rose, you have Ableton Suite, correct? You got 12, and is it standard or Suite? Was it expensive? Expensive. So chances are you got Suite. So if you spent over $600, because I can't remember the full price of it now, but if you spent over $600, then that's A, that's quite expensive, and B, you should have Ableton Suite. Then you have some decent multi samples available to you for free. Yes, still paying for it. Are you doing uh, the 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 monthly thing? I'm glad they added that because yeah, it was just so expensive. I was only lucky because I worked for Store DJ. I got a free education copy, so that was my perk for working at a store. And this version I'm using is still the same version I got all those years ago. Same license. I just paid to upgrade to the big 11s and 12s since then. So it's been a big saving for me. So lucky me, haha for you, I suppose. But hey, I worked for it. The tests were very hard. Anyway, if you go to PAX in Ableton Suite, I don't know if anyone's actually done this, but if you actually went to all available packs, you notice here, sorry, the skin is a bit dark, isn't it? Let me switch it. That's a bit better. If you look here, there's a lot of stuff I haven't downloaded, and chances are you're in the same situation. Some of these are quite large, and some of these things I just don't need because I am not a classical composer. I don't write for screen. I used to, but I don't do anymore. It's not really, it's not stuff that makes me happy, right? But if you see here, it says upright piano by Spitfire Audio. Yeah, so that already alludes to the fact that it's an upright piano and it's made by a reputable sample company called Spitfire Audio. The same company that you see people like Hans Zimmer and Junkie XL use for their big screen projects. Espresso Choir by Spitfire, so there's choir right there. There's some acoustic drum stuff, brass quartet. Now I don't need any of that because I don't work in that realm, but I do like strings. So I got String Quartet by Spitfire, and these are all free, quote unquote, because we pay that much money to get Suite. Yeah. So if you got Ableton Suite, and the way to check is to go live, about live, just see what version you have. I'm running the beta version, but I can only do that because I have Suite. And if you do that, you can download, because these are yours, orchestral packs, orchestral sounds, right? Does it come by? Yes, it comes with default, but it does. They don't install everything because some of the stuff is huge. Like we're talking about 10, 20 gigs, right? I've only kept the one thing. That need to zoom in a bit more here. There we go. I have string quartet. So if I fire this up, go to instruments, all in one. Hopefully this plays through. Oh yeah, you need to listen to. You can't hear me yet. Sorry, people. Let me fire this up. More worryingly, I couldn't hear it, so I'm gonna have to change the settings. Let me start stream. Copy. All right, everyone in the chat, link to my Ableton audio link. And why am I not getting sound? Audio, no device, system device. That should work. Nope, not for me. You should. I reckon you can hear it, but I can't. Can everyone hear it? Thumbs up. Yep. So I can't hear it, which is hilarious. Why you do this? M4. Go back to this. External headphones. It might be something to do with feedback. Let me just check this. Mute when capturing. Okay. Okay, I can hear it. Okay, so we get realistic string sounds and they're great, provided you put some work to it. So I'm gonna give you some advice straight off the bat. When I say put some work to it, I mean this. I mean you play it in by hand if you can. And if you're someone like me, if you can't do that, then you do the next best thing. You put in your notes. Good old pre-made progressions. Love that. So what you should do is treat it like a real instrument. Like don't just keep things blocky. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the converter here, but just in case you never thought about this, then this helps take these samples and make them sound more human. Just grabbing them, slipping the timing a bit just to make it sound more realistic, because not everyone plays at the same time every time, because we're not robots. And more importantly, we need to actually play around with the velocities. So here I'll randomize the velocities like so. Oh, I don't want ramp. So I want it random because I want it to be realistic. That's already a big improvement, but I'll actually grab everything and turn it a bit lower. And because I'm this way inclined, I would also use the other tricks, like using velocity MIDI tools. So this lives in MIDI effects, velocity. I want to further randomize how it's played. So what this is doing is that it's taking the MIDI information that I have here, but it's applying a randomized velocity. So even though I randomized it here, see that's kind of random, it's bouncing around within these ranges. I'm doing more random. So it never plays the same in theory when I cycle it. Everyone hearing that okay still? So that's how you start adding authenticity to these type of samples. Okay, so I stress again, whether using Contact or Ableton's Ableton's version of this. Um, so all these kind of realistic sounds in Ableton, or if you buy Native Instruments Contact, it's the same thing. You're using samples, so don't just go, all right, I don't like these strings, sounds, synth thing. It's not correct to say synth. It's not a synth. It is recordings that we're using. And the reason why this is working out the way it is because if I actually dive into this instrument, I can see that there's multiple devices playing back pieces of audio. See, this is all audio. And there's 11 channels in this instrument of audio. If I zoom in a lot, I can see where it's playing. So all these sounds are samples. I know I said it, I repeat it a lot, but I need to stress that because if you buy Contact, you're also getting samples. And why Contact is so popular is because they do have great samples. They do. And there's the reason why is because Native Instruments Contact, which is actually the multi-sampler engine behind it, which looks like this, is very powerful. It is more powerful than Ableton's because it has everything you need. It has effects in it, where the Ableton sampler has no effects because you can put effects after, right? But the instrument in here is more complex. So it allows people who companies like Abbey Road or Spitfire, those sort of companies, they use Contact as a host for their samples. So a very legitimate business opportunity for someone who's good at recording is to record high quality recordings of drummers, of synth players, playing one note at a time, or playing a stable one note, sustained note for a long time. They record it at best quality as possible, and they shove it all into Contact, or in Ableton's case, they shoved it into Ableton's sampler. As another word of warning though, if this is the world you want to get into, just prepare yourself with some of these install sizes, the sizes of these libraries, because the better sounding, the more dynamic, the more expressive the multi-sample instrument it is, the more space it's going to take. You can't get around that. There's a logical sense to it. There's a logical limitations to it. If I record a guitarist playing every style he knows how to play, every technique he knows how to play, every soft, loud note, that's a recording required, a minute-long recording or even longer, depending, right? So the gigs start adding up, right? So just to give you an idea, Contact itself, let's see how big is Contact. Contact, the multi-sampling engine itself, isn't big. It says 600 and just under a gig. It's not too bad, right? But as you probably just caught that before, if I wanted nice action strings, which are very good for TV and stuff like that and movies, I need 31 gigs of space. That's not even the biggest thing I've seen here. Some of the bigger ones. Where's Noir? Anyone here know Oh no, I thought that would be bigger. Still 16 gigs for Noir, which is Nils Fram's piano. Where's the biggest? Can I sort by? Actually, it doesn't matter. You can see some of these are huge, 16 gigs. So I own this product, but I don't install any of it. I don't have any of it on my computer because I don't need it. I own it because I won a music production competition back in the day, and I have almost perpetually their contact library for free. So that's cool, but it's wasted on me because I don't work in this world. Because I don't see the need to add a quaternary violin to my music. That's maybe at one time in the future, but that doesn't interest me. That's 30 gigs if I want to install just high quality violins. Huge, right? And it should make sense. Like synths shouldn't take up much space because they're just programs. They're not. They're just data that's making sound using code. Whereas a clue, if whatever you're using is using audio samples and the installation size is over a gig, then, oh, sorry, I didn't say that well. To prove that a synth is not truly a synth, technically, or it's a synth that uses that relies a lot on audio, you'll see synths that will have over a gig install sizes, right? But plugins, they shouldn't be that big at all. Code shouldn't take up so much space. See this EQ, 89 megs. That's about right. Speaking of synths, Massive is very similar to Serum. It's a gig, 1.29 gigs. That's okay because that's a lot of wavetables. I get that, right? But some of these other ones, and this is my bone to pick here, right? There's a synth, quote unquote, called Analog Dreams. It's 4 gigs. It's like, really? Well, that doesn't make sense, especially when you take when you look at the picture of Analog Dreams. Just look at this. Apparently, I can buy a synth, quote unquote, that looks like this. Okay. Now, you spend enough time with me, you'll know that I'll look at this and I'll be like, that's not a synth. Why are you pretending? Why are you making me install 4 gigs worth of data and you give me a synth, quote unquote, that only allows me to do filter cutoff, filter resonance, attack and release of what? Of what? Of the whole thing, okay? One EQ dial, a delay. What is this instrument? What is this? Doesn't make sense to me. I want to. If I get a synth, I want to be able to see my oscillators. I need to see the filters. I need to see my modulators. That's my basics, right? I don't see any of that here. What's going on? You're telling me I can buy this, and this is free if you get complete start, but by itself it's $100, okay? And you're telling me it download size 3.6 gigs, install size is 4.11 gigs. Why am I getting a synth that doesn't let me synthesize? It makes no sense, right? So that's my problem with Contact and what Native Instruments is heading towards to. It's the company spits out this once almost every 2 months. Like they'll spit out a new product that has a very cool name and makes you go, ooh, I like a bit of amplified funk. And you just go, cool. Oh, Alicia's keys from Alicia Keys. Oh yeah, I want her keys. Why not, right? But it doesn't make sense to me because I'm just buying samples. This is a expensive way to buy samples, essentially, that have limited playability, right? Some of them are well made, don't get me wrong. Some of them have a lot of playability, but they're still samples. Like, so for example, one of the more impressive ones is called Arcus, and that's got a bit more going on to it. And it does require 9 gigs to install, which is a bit much, right? But it's fairly powerful, but it's also hilariously limited. So this is why this is great for composers, and I'm not throwing any shade at composers. I have nothing but respect at composers. It's just not my field, right? But if you're a composer, you need this. You need a tool that sounds good. You just turn the dial and it sounds cool, and that's it. You're getting a sound ready to go. It's already half processed for you. You're just composing, right? So for composers, you need this. For electronic musicians, this stuff has very little flexibility. So don't be surprised if you make stuff that sounds like someone else that's also using Contact, because these sounds, they're not that changeable. They're not that malleable. So I hope you're getting my opinion on this, which I think logically makes a lot of sense. Composers are must, because you need good strings, you need good textures, you need good real instruments to use for a wide range of projects. As an electronic musician, if you're getting the string stuff because you want strings, sure, that makes a lot of sense because it's cheaper than hiring an orchestra, right? But if you're buying Native Instruments synths and you want to stand out from the rest and you want to, actually have your own sound, yeah, which is obviously the name of the game if you're an electronic musician, then not all their products are true synths. Like Massive is, for sure it is. Massive is one of the ones that changed the game back in the day. So that's fine. But this, Retro Machines, it's not. It's playing through Contact, which is your first clue that it's using samples. And B, what is a sound oscillator that has no waveform? What's fat? Okay, I see an LFO. Sample start, excuse me. Silly. Cut off res. Okay, there's my filter. Okay, I got envelope amount. That's good. That's passable. But my amp envelope, my main envelope only has attack and release. Okay. Where's the filter envelope? No, it just says envelope decay here. So no, not even attack, sustain, release. I only get envelope decay in the filter envelope. What's the point? Don't give me this, this makes no sense as electronic musician. Okay, so ultimately you decide, but I want you to be more informed about these tools, right? Get Contact if you want real instruments, especially if you're a composer, or if you just need strings, guitars, acoustic drums, those type of tools in your arsenal, right? If you legitimately want to use and explore them, Contact is great. Ableton's multi-sample is great as well. So try Ableton's first, right? But if your name of the game is to try and stand out and make pure electronic music and have your own style like Aphex Twin or Burial and these sort of people, then it's pure synthesis and sampling, not multi-sampling. They don't use this stuff. No way, right? Any questions about that? And a spiel, yeah. It's a bit of a spiel, but yeah. Any questions? Hope that makes sense, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and a good thing to know as well, if you're liking what this is offering, Contact is quite expensive, but you can get Contact Player for free. So what Contact Player is, it is literally just a surface level of Contact. So you can't get into the back end and change the samples, or you can't make your own multi-sample library, because some people buy Contact, the full version, just to do that, which is something I dabbled with. So you can use it to make products to sell if you're into that kind of hustle, yeah. But if you just want Contact to play the instruments, just get the free Contact Player, and then look at companies like Spitfire and Spitfire Audio, and just see what is Contact Player enabled. So they'll tell you. So if I go to not shops, discover, and go strings. If you just do a little bit of a deep dive, some of these products will tell you if they're compatible with the Native Instruments platform, which it is, and more importantly, a lot of them will actually tell you if it's contact player required. What you need to do is to go into the requirements. So I go to tech specs, PC requirements. Can I use this library? Read more. Oh, they're making us work a bit here. Product system requirements. Dedicated plugin. Oh yeah, okay. So some of the newer Spitfire stuff, they don't need contact at all. They just use their own proprietary sample player, which makes sense. But let me just quickly look. Contact player compatible libraries. Here we go. There's a whole blog about it. Start to finish. What's in the box? So yes, some of these libraries which you got to buy or you get for free with the complete start. Start. It's kind of like an intro for native instruments. They give you some. Some of these don't require the full contact to play. So that's kind of good to know. But look, there's a whole blog about it. It's a little quick Google search here. And I can see complete contact free. So they say which companies do free contact player. So this is a third-party company, Clang, never heard of them before. All instruments require full contact version or higher. Oh, that's a lie. Makes you work a bit, doesn't it? But Clang, wrong tools. What's wrong tools? Oh no, it says here. It says require full version. So they do tell you. Any contact player ones here? Works with free contact player. Oh, really? Okay, that one's good. Anyway, if you want to know more about it, maybe hit me up. But yeah, there's a free way to get into this, yeah, besides Ableton. Anyway, so what is a multi-sample? Let's have a look at one. Oh boy. What did I just open up here? So the reason why these libraries can be quite large, including Ableton's own multi-samples, if you download them, is because the amount of recording detail. It's not just a simple case of recording someone playing every note. That's already quite a hard process, like getting them to play keys from C1 all the way up to C6 or something. That's already different, right? But a good sample library, and the reason why some sampled instruments sound better than others is because there's detail to it. So if I go to velocity here, I can see that there's also a recording for every velocity hit. That's why the gigs really get high, because they're recording someone playing extremely softly for velocity level 1. Okay. And from 1 to 127, that's 128, a range of 128 channels. So what that means is you can, and a lot of people try to, you can record a specific recording for every velocity level, or at least some of it or most of it. So in Ableton's case, they did. Thank you, Ableton, and Spitfire. And it means that you have an instrument that is extremely expressive. Right? So that's why the libraries, the size of some of these are big. And that should give you a clue that the instrument is quite expressive. They recorded it well. Because, everyone can record 10 seconds of someone playing. Everyone will get the same result in terms of megabytes. It will always be like 10 seconds will be roughly 10 megabytes, right? I may have grossly miscalculated that, but that doesn't matter. Then you multiply it by a range of notes. So typically they try to keep it in the realistic range of the instrument. So I got 6 octaves worth here, 1 to 6, or maybe just under. So you got to multiply all the notes in between that. which is roughly 6 octaves, 6 times 2, 12, which is roughly 70 odd notes. So you need to capture all of that. And then the next level is to get the dynamics. So 1 times 127 for each note. So 127 times 72 is and the whole unholy number that I can't figure out right now. It's a lot. So that's why it makes sense for some of these things to be gigs and gigs and gigs, right? But that's the only way to do it to this point. Like there's something new in the game, something brand new to the game that I'll talk about next week that's trying to change that. Because some of these sample libraries, as good as they can sound, they're still limited. But that's why I said for the right scenario, they're perfect. For composers, it's perfect because you just need some good strings, good acoustic drums. Like for me, even though I said I don't like these type of tools, there is a tool on my personal instrument collection that I must have called Addictive Drums, and they are multi-sampled acoustic drums. Because if I want to make, because as you can probably tell with the way I do things, I like a lot of drum breaks. So, there's only so many drum breaks you can use that are kind of overused in electronic music, like the Amen break, the think break, and those sort of things. So I get bored I get a bit bored with those same kind of breaks people use. So I tend to make my own. Can't play right now. Too tired. But yeah, typically I'll record a funk rhythm myself, and I convert it to audio and treat that as my own personal break. Yeah. And some of these come with rhythms with it as well. So look, that's my argument, because I do use acoustic drums for some of my music. So in that situation, you can see why multi-sample stuff is very useful in that instance. Yeah, seems like overkill. Can the human ear tell the difference? Definitely can, and especially if you start comparing sample libraries. If you listen to some versus other companies, and outside of Ableton, outside of Contact, because there's a few companies out there. Decent Sampler is another one. If you look at them all, not all of them are great, right? And yeah, it's not to say that that the Contact and Ableton should be like your only choices. You should look at other ones too, because some of them might speak to you more than others. But there is something to be said about the clarity, how well it's recorded. Like for me, there's a lot of drum multi-samplers out there. So this tool is technically a multi-sample drum instrument. Sometimes it's called a drum rompler as well. To me, it's the most cleanest recording yet that I've heard. That's just different velocities I'm triggering of the snare. To me, it's good enough. It's better than the ones I've heard from Native Instruments. It's better than the ones that I heard from, what's the other big one? Toontrack. I'm not a big fan of theirs. I like Addictive Drums. They do have a cleaner starting point for me, because then if it's clean, I can treat it my own way. So yeah, this works for me. So that's my argument for using this brand. This brand is XLN Audio. I don't know if their tag is there. There it is, XLN Audio. So they're not exactly Contact, but I prefer theirs. So yeah, I can tell the difference between acoustic drum kits from different companies. So humans can tell, and it's up to you to decide what's perfect for you. And you got to balance it out with the amount of gigs it takes, because Addictive Drums takes 25 gigs, right? So, and I'm very precious with my gigs, so it took a lot to kind of convince myself to use this one, right? Ableton's one is also a similar size, and so is Native Instruments, but to me, the Addictive one sounds the best. But you have to try it yourself, try the demos, and you got to decide if you even need acoustic drums. Like, Like for you, Rose, you got a drum kit. There's no reason why you shouldn't record your own drum kit, especially if you're a drummer, then you can do things I can't do. So you can make your drum kit sound way better than my plugin, I'm sure, right? Anyway, so as you can see, there's an incredible amount of detail potentially with this instrument, right? It's kind of scary looking at it. So let's just introduce ourselves to sampler properly. I'm going to put simpler onto a track. Here's the drum. All right. Oh yeah, true. Sorry, I misread the lines. Fair enough, Kieran. So simpler. We know the simpler. We're a bit more familiar with it since we started this course, aren't we? Did you know that simpler is the baby brother of sampler? Not just figuratively speaking, but actually technically as well. To prove this, you grab a simpler on a track, you right click it, and you look at this option that says simpler to sampler, and you can see it converts itself to sampler. You can even go backwards, sampler back to simpler. So that proves that it's the same engine, okay? The next thing that's kind of interesting is some of you may have realized that the not the time stretching, the pitching in simpler may not be fantastic. So you might push it to over 6, 7 semitones and it starts sounding pretty yucky. The sound breaks up or whatever. I'd like you to just check for me actually, because last time I checked on older versions when I just started teaching at TAFE, there was a reason why people's simplers sounded the way they did, right? So I want you to check something for me, everyone. Please open a blank MIDI track, put a simpler on it, convert it to sampler, so right click it and convert to sampler. And I want you to tell me what it says for you here under interpol. Just do that for me quickly. I just want to know what it is for everyone here. Yeah, just put simpler on there first because I want you to get used to this thing about converting simpler to sampler. So right click, convert to sampler. And I want you to tell me what your interpol says. Best. Okay, how about everyone else? Fair enough, Rose. I'll just get Jackson's. Yeah. Because it may be that since Ableton 12 they changed it to best. So yours should be best as well, Jackson. The best interpol. The best. Okay. So that's good. So they changed this in Ableton 12. It used to be in 10 and 11. This was set to normal. And one of my party tricks was to get all my students to convert this to sampler, switch it to best, flick it back to simpler, and then saving this as a default, which you don't need to do, okay? So in other words, the problems I was talking about doesn't exist really, because if you pitch it over 5 or 6 semitones, it still sounds decent on a lot of samples, and only when you push it above an octave or whatever, then it starts sounding a bit yuck, as it should, because that's the limitation of samples. But it used to be that it used to sound worse, right? It used to be on normal interpolation. If I grabbed a sample, if I just grabbed a chord or something, yeah, it used to be. Oh, don't need these notes. Go up an octave. Okay, it used to be that simpler had a limitation. It still sounds half decent, so let me make it no interpolation. Go back to simpler. You hear that sounds like bit crush? All that stuff. Now, if I go to best, you shouldn't hear that anymore. See, that sounds smoother. There's none of that. Yeah. So go back. So that's interesting, right? So what I'm doing is when I go to sampler from simpler, I can change the sound quality within it. Now, personally, I don't know why mine's set to best. I must be because I'm using beta and it resets some of the settings, but I actually like the bad quality because for me, I'm all about the 90s era, the mid to late 90s and early 2000s era of sampling. I like that that kind of warmer, crunchy alias sound. That the anti-aliasing is that, or not anti-aliasing, but the aliasing is that kind of distortions you're hearing. To me, that's magic. So personally, I actually rather that I have no interpolation, switch it back to simpler, and saving that as a default. Because why? When you do so, let me just save as a default preset for myself. Yeah. The reason being is because in sampler, because it's the same engine as simpler, you can change how the quality sounds. Luckily for you, for everyone here, it should be on best, so it should sound clear throughout. But if you're like me and you're trying to chase that era of sound design where things were crunchy, not super clear, and had all these kind of artifacts, then you actually need to go backwards and have no interpolation. Because what interpolation is, it's a smoothing. It's anti-aliasing, which means it gets rid of those artifacts. So these are levels of it. Some, a decent amount, and of course, maximum amount of smoothing where possible. Okay? So just be aware of that. Okay? Now, if we just review simpler for a bit, I just put a sample in here. What's simpler about? It's got an audio section. I have a classic mode, one-shot mode, which isn't that useful. There's a slice mode, which is quite useful. That's unique to simpler. That's very useful, right? But classic mode, the main thing I do in classic mode is I can turn on looping, so I can designate a loop point and have it loop. And why I want the loop is because I want to actually play with the envelopes. Alright, so I can do that. Change the start point. And besides this audio section, I have my filters. I have an LFO section, which I can see more detail here. So within my filters and LFOs, I can shape the sound more. So for example, I can send an LFO to the filter to create movement. I can and send an envelope to the filter. I can do volume LFO. And of course, I got my pitch envelope here and transposition here. Do all that, right? So that's what Simpler can do. Yeah, it's got this the sample editor, the optional slice mode, which is lots of fun, one filter with the envelope inside, LFO with 4 destinations, volume, pan, pitch filter, pitch envelope, standard tuning controls. Okay, and of course the main amp envelope. So 3 envelopes in total, 1 LFO. So if I go to the big brother here, sampler, why is there a need to do this when it kind of sounds the same? Yeah. Well, first of all, you have more options in terms of looping and crossfading. You had that interpolation I was mentioning before, but one of my favorite things is I'd rather the loop to play backwards and forwards, not just loop around and around, if that makes sense. So only with Ableton Sampler, not Simpler, can you get this technique called ping pong looping. Where it goes, loops the section back and forwards and then it goes back again. That's always been something that I was like, oh, this is my teen listening right there. That's such a big technique back in the old days. The other thing is that if you go to the other tabs, pitch and oscillator, you can see your P envelope, which is your pitch envelope. That's a better way of looking at it, I suppose. It's kind of separated and you can see where your tuning is and whatever. But this oscillator alone is weird because you're oscillating using the audio as a source. So that might not make sense. But then when you realize what's going on here, it says FM or AM. So FM. FM we talked about in Ableton Operator. You can use, instead of 2 sine waves, you can use sine wave against the audio, which is so weird, but I love it. And there's AM, which we never talked about, which is a similar theory to FM. This is weird. Like, it's not something that everyone would do, but what I would do is, let's just say you don't want to use operator because it's too complex, but you want to get some FM sounds. So you stick to your basics. You go to the basic waveforms I gave you back in the day. Waveform basics. You use sine wave or triangle, the old reliables. You loop it. Let's turn the LFO off. Let me just turn the pitch envelope off for now. Then I go to sampler, oscillator on. to filter global. There's a volume control here. These waveforms come from operator, so I can try different ones. Heaps of reverb. I don't need reverb all the time. So if you hear that type of sound, you're like, oh, that's FM, but I'm too scared of operator. Well, you can kind of do it in sampler as well. But yeah, this is strange. I must admit, that's very strange. Besides this, you got the filter global section. That's where your filter is, your filter envelopes here. It's way better labeled. So if I chose a different sound, let's go back to this nice pad sound. And don't worry about this, I'll come back to this. That's a bit too low. So my filter envelope's sitting here. It's on by default, which is good. I can turn it off, which I don't know why you would. But here you go, you can send it. Remember to set a starting point here. To get those type of sounds. So filter envelope, as you know, I'm a big fan of filter envelopes. I'd say it's a must learn technique throughout this course. And this is that classic pluck shape again. Very cool. So you can do a lot of sound design with that. Within this filter section, there's a distortion just lurking here, shaper. Soft clipping, hard clipping, sine, just various flavors. Flavor, and of course there's a modulation tab, and it already shows you how deep this instrument goes. Ignoring aux, actually no, I won't ignore it. Aux is another envelope I can send to different areas of the instrument, so this is where it gets a bit scary. But for those who saw how powerful Serum was and how much you can modulate, Ableton Sampler is just as powerful as a sampler, because you can send modulations, so you can send envelopes to these things like sample start and sample selector, which is crazy, which I'll get back to as well. But sample offset, I'm effectively telling the sampler to play up and down this area at a certain time. But really I wouldn't use an envelope for that. I would actually use LFO2, because I'll explain LFO1 in a second, to go to the same area and play randomly. See it playing randomly at different points, not just from the beginning at every time. It's really cool. I can send up higher. So that may not make sense on a sample like this, but on like a vocal, Do I have full size? Oh yeah, let's do that. Good old. Where's my middle C? So that makes sense when I'm using something like an arpeggiator, just to spit out something completely random for me. Which is very, very fun. So that makes it easy to do this stuff. Remember, in Simpler, I had to use an external LFO and map it to sample start to do the same thing. Ableton Sampler can do it within its modulation tab already, which is lots of fun. LFO 1 is something you're familiar with, despite it looking slightly different. This is your basic LFO, the same in Simpler, and it's got the 4 destinations it can send it to. So there's your basic one. But LFO 2 and 3, so this instrument has 3 LFOs as opposed to 1, you can send them to 4 other destinations, up to 4 other destinations, but at a time, I should say. And there's way more destinations you can try. Okay. Now, already at this point, I'm fully aware that you might look at this and be like, this is far too complex for me. But let me just show you why you would use this at all in a basic sense. Okay. So, and yeah, this will hopefully make sense. So, first of all, did you ever wonder why some of your samples had multiple keys to them? Yeah, you've seen that? Yeah, you've seen that, right? It seems strange where sometimes you see an instrument and you go, okay, let's open this, and you're like, oh, okay, I got C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, and then randomly some other keys, right? So what's the purpose of them? So they tell you what notes they are, I suppose, but why? Why is there so many of these? Well, I'll show you. Under zone, the first control, I can grab a single one of these, chuck it in here, and look at this. It's automatically done what Simpler did. It's split the sample across the whole span of the keyboard, which is 88 keys. Let me get rid of arpeggiator. Let me get rid of that drive for a second. So you can see what happens when I go too low. The sample starts getting a bit iffy, doesn't it? Ooh, especially there. How about higher? Ooh, not so good there, is it? So this Callisto sample I got from somewhere, and I actually got this through Machine, which is hilarious. This is what you're meant to do, okay? This is labeled C1. So I'm gonna chuck it on here and tell it to play from C1. I'm just using my brackets here. And instead of letting it span across the whole keyboard, I'm just saying, look, just play here, where you belong. C2. And do this. Okay. C3. Starting to make sense. C4. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense once you see it, because this is literally how contact libraries and good multi-sample libraries are made. C4. Okay. And look, don't get me wrong, this is tedious. I'm not gonna pretend it's not, yeah. But you can imagine, and I've said this before, sometimes you have a day where you want to make music, but you also don't. You know what I mean? When you sit down, you're like, I want to make something, and nothing happens, right? So what I like to do in those situations, I like to do this kind of stuff, right? I tinker, I sound design, I make stuff, okay? Now, what happens is, this is actually not the tedious part, believe it or not. So I set the ranges correctly, but what I need to do now is I need to go into sample and set their root notes. So go back to C1 and set that root note to be C1. C2, set it to C2, so on, so forth. All right, C3 should be fine, C4, C5. And remember, at C0, this was not sounding good, right? This instrument, that when I just put one of them in here and I split it, I spread it across the span of the keyboard, it didn't sound good at C0 and definitely didn't sound good at C6. The fact that I have a multi-sample that goes up to C6 means that I have a better chance of a better sound at the high notes. So let's see here. And just to be cheeky, I'm going to push this C1 down to C0. Let's just see our result here. Turn it to C0. Oh, nice. Oh, that still sounds good, doesn't it? Higher. Cool. So I have a better range instrument. This is because of software limitations. What's because of software limitations? Well, this was just what was provided to me by a machine. So a machine, something that Jackson uses. There was this Callisto sample he could pull up on his machine, and it was made up of a series of sampled notes that's been transposed already for him, split across the keyboard for him, because machine does this too. But sometimes you find samples which only have maybe 4 octaves, and some only 3. I wouldn't say it's software limitations. I think it's a limitation of space and logistical choice. Like sometimes some people provide multi-samples that are tiny because they couldn't be bothered multi-sampling too much, right? A good multi-sample won't just give me octaves. They'll give me every note, right? But then typically I'll have to pay for that, right? So I'm making the best of my situation. I was given 6 octaves of C. I still got to spread them, but this is way better than getting one note and playing it in simpler. Because as you know with simpler, when you go too far or too low, it starts breaking up. Whereas this has a higher chance to be better definition. So that's cool, right? But here's the other cool thing. Multi-samplers, they don't know what you're putting in there. They like Ableton Contact, the super contact that I talked a lot about just then, how powerful it was. They don't know what sample you're putting in. It's just audio, right? So what's stopping you from doing this? Let's find something else in C. It's not C, but it's A, but we'll make it work, I reckon. Oh no, let's just see what else we got. I'm sure I got some C's here. C, chuck it in there too. Right, but really I should be doing this. Right, and C3. What other sounds do I have? Some strings. Oh, but at least I got some more notes though. So let's go C. Let's reduce the range here. Let's start this from C0. C0. Where are you at? There we go. And really what I should be doing is I'll go to each sample and enabling sustain mode, so loop modes. And release mode. Now, anyone play with a keyboard instrument before and notice certain sounds will be maybe like what's the word, like bass on the left hand side of the keyboard and then strings on the right hand side? Anyone seen that? Or guitar on the right hand side, bass on the left, yeah. If you haven't, then that's okay, but hopefully it makes sense how that's set up. It's literally like this, because sometimes you buy keyboards from Yamaha or Korg, like the Motif, the Trinity. What you don't realize, they're not true synthesizers, just because they're multi-samples, or romplers they call them, and they host a bunch of samples. And some of them are set up in a way where all the bass stuff is on the left hand side or on the lower registers, something different in the mid, something different to the highs. So I can emulate that here. So if I want a bass sound, where's good old big fat square? Where you at? Downloads. So I have this fully customizable performance instrument, really, right? Where I can say, hey, left hand B bass. As long as I said the root note correctly. So that's C0. Bit of a tinkering job, isn't it? So look, my keyboard span is going to be 37 notes, but let's hope for the best. Where's my octaves? My keyboard's not being recognized. Is it because it's not being plugged in? That's weird. Plug it in again. Okay, Mini Plus. Okay. Doesn't like that port anymore. Okay. Not working. That's okay. I'll just have to do it on my computer keyboard. It's weird. Okay. So that's my low notes. So in other words, this is the way to make a performance instrument using just samples. Okay, so this takes no CPU. This because sampling does not take CPU as much as synths do. Right? Takes a bit of work, but once you've done it, once you set it up, you can go, okay, rename Cali bass string ting, save, and it's an instrument that I can recall. And I still have the option of changing how it sounds. unique because I'm using a combination of synthesis and sampling, because I made this big fat square back in the day. That came from a Core Game S20, and I gave it to you for your learning purposes, but it's a very good square. And I'm repurposing it as a weird Callisto instrument. It's multi-layered instrument, right? And the moment I put some nice effects on this is going to sound pretty epic. Oops, some delay, please. And essentially, we're doing what Contact does. Give me a slower attack, please. So when you press one key, it's playing because they are overlapping, as you can see. So where it's overlapping, it will play that sample. So this note I'm playing is D2. When I play a D2, I get Callisto C2 playing, as well as vintage strings and big fat square. Then I have this random electric piano the next octave up. But really I should be stretching that as well. Change the root note. So that's the mechanic you gotta get used to. If this sounds like something you want to dive into, put your sample in there, know what key it is, because if you don't, then you're working blind. That doesn't help. But know what key it is, set the root note so it reflects that, and then you can have this nice, well-defined instrument. Kind of cool. Questions so far? No questions? Can we trust all samples keys written there? Yeah, most of the times you can. I've yet to seen an issue where it's not correct, because typically people sample for that purpose. And if you don't, just chuck a tune on it. There's always ways to retune, so there's no problem. And that's why this sampler also, just like Simpler, has the ability to change your transposition in tune. Oops, there's something transposed. My bad. And you can do it as a whole instrument, or you can do it per sample here. So I can change the note of it here. So that's me doing it wrong. But in theory, if the sample is wrong, then I can shift the semitone here or the D tune. Yeah. So so if I wanted to be clever, I take one, duplicate it, and detune it slightly to create the same effect. But I need to do it for every range of my key bed that I'm playing. So C2, I got to do it as well. Detune the second one. So yeah, lots of work, lots of finicky work, but it's kind of worth it to create something potentially completely unique. Either unique to you or unique compared to what everyone's heard to before. Oops, I should have done that. Duplicate this, set that to 0, 5. And really this doesn't make that much sense to do it on a Callisto sound because it's very pure, but if I do it to the big fat square, and I should be looping this. Cool, eh? Yeah, I think it's fantastic. Anyway, do you remember last week when we started talking about hardware? Well, there was a reason why I did that. Hopefully this thing turns on. So last week, where's my camera? So last week, I'll just turn on mirror magnet. Last week, I introduced you to a piece of hardware that lives at Ultimo TAFE, just this compact little guy. Where's the screen gone? There we go. This guy. Right. So what's really cool about multi-samples, if you haven't figured it out, I'll turn myself off now, is what you could do is you can get access to a piece of hardware, play around with it, and in theory, capture it. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, you know, I'm lucky to have access to a Sims room and I get to build it. I get to do all this stuff in it, right? Hooray for me, right? But you might not have that same opportunity. You might have a friend that has some great Sims. You might only once in a while come to TAFE Ultimo to see that the setup I was talking about, blah, blah, blah. So how do you use this stuff, right? One way to use this stuff is if you go, let me delete this. I'll save this because it's kind of nice actually. I might keep it. Yeah. What you can do is you can capture an instrument. Okay, so I'll show you how. External instrument, get rid of all the effects. External instrument to audio. Oh, don't do this to me. Computer's not behaving lately. Don't know why. Audio input on. Please show up here. Yeah, why are you doing this to me, mate? It's meant to be showing up here. The Roland SH. Let me try a different port. Actually, I think it's the cable. That cable doesn't agree with me. Let's use a different one. Just bear with me, guys. Okay. Now, you should behave. There you go. So last week I showed you how to implement a piece of hardware with Ableton. So let's do that again. This sounds pretty, you know, it is special. Especially that type of sound is very unique to this Roland instrument. Daft Punk, anyone? Meow, 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 meow. Anyway, what I can do is I can sample multiple notes for my keepsake. So how would I do that? I just set up what I want to record. So I'll show you. Just hitting duplicate, shifting up a note at a time. I ask myself, how much do I want? How much time do I have? For us, there's not much time, so I won't go too crazy. I'm going to aim for 4 octaves. That should be plenty. So again, slightly tedious process, but you know, this is kind of cool. So what I'm showing you is something you potentially can do at your mate's place, at a shop, if the shop is cool. So the shop's like, yeah, you can pull your laptop out and play with the synths. I know what you're trying to do. Some shops don't know what you're trying to do. But yeah, you can, in theory, steal the sound for yourself for free. All you need is a synth that has USB interface, or bring your own interface, just not to be too dodgy. But there we go. I've got a note for every same interval. And let me just expand this out. It's 4 bars. Cool. What I can do is I can right click this now and bounce track in place. Look what happens here. And by the way, this is really bad because I got my division wrong. I should have made it twice as long. No, they're a bit too short, but that's okay. It's more important I showed you how to do it. Ooh, actually that's really bad, too short. Let me undo this, do this again. Just double it. Did it freeze itself? Unfreeze. Should be longer. So let's just do that, and I won't have as much resonance. Cool. Bounce track in place. You're going to cop this again, this live recording. It's live, yeah? Cool. Here's what I'm going to do. It's at every beat. So I'm just hitting Command E. I'm just chopping them. Go chop them individually. Again, a little bit of hard yakka, but it's okay. That last one doesn't need to be as long. Get rid of that one. Cool. So if I open a simpler, convert it to sampler, open zone, I can take all these slices. This is the tricky part. I need to drag it into sampler somehow. Oops. Come on, buddy. You can do it. Highlight, highlight, drag. It's a bit tricky, but it's doable. Let me just pull this out here. Might need to go to this view. I just wish it didn't switch over. There we go. And now here's the trick. The problem is it's automatically spanned all the notes for me. So what I should do, figuring I'm starting with the first note, is I just need to select where it begins actually, no, I don't need to do that. I just need to do this. I just need to right click any of these and distribute ranges equally. Cool. So now, if I listen to this track, I have a instrument captured. And what's the best thing about this? This instrument I'm capturing is monophonic, so it's one voice at a time. The fact that I sampled each note and put it into sampler, I can play multiple notes because the sampler has polyphony. So in theory, you can make a mini moog sound polyphonic because most all mini moogs are monophonic, but you can actually make it sound polyphonic, which is really cool. So what I'm going to offer you is, and I've set this up already, so I'll put a link into classwork over this week. I've multi-sampled the Moog Sub 37 in our studio space. So I can give you, yeah, I mean, typically they're monophonic because pricing, because the tone of it's fantastic, but to make it polyphonic would be too expensive, which makes sense because a mini Moog is about 3 to 4 grand. A Moog 1, which is polyphonic, the 8-voice edition is 13 grand. So it's too expensive. So what we can do is we can capture the Moog and make it polyphonic this way. So it's a nice way around it. One thing I really should do now is to go to all of them because I can select all the samples and turn on sustain mode. And actually, this is where the really tedious parts come in. You go into each sample and you adjust where you want to play and fix it all up. But that's why you pay Native Instruments, or you pay these companies to make these sample instruments. It is a bit of work to do it well. Even the Sub 37 samples I made for everyone, they're good, but they're not great. At least they're playable, yeah? And it's nice to play them polyphonically. Okay. Now, before we go, I hope you consider this technique of using Ableton Sampler as a very legitimate way of making music and some cool sounds by layering samples that don't really go together. But it's a technique to make interesting pads and leads because you can layer weird things together if you want. And of course, all that extra modulation makes it really fancy. Yeah, I could, but that's a whole side hustle. It's going to take a lot of time, which I don't have. Maybe maybe in the future. Maybe before I quit TAFE, I might just multi-sample everything and make really good samples of those instruments. But yeah, it's an interesting setup that is very cool, and also a lot of work to set up. Before I leave, let me just open the door for my son. 1 second. Hi, Leo. Hello. Yes. Yes. The last thing I'll mention is this is actually how hip hop producers back in the day would have used these sort of tools, because what you can do is also take samples like this. Let me show you stuff to chop. Here's a song. So in the old days when they had samplers like MPCs and whatever, what they would do is they'll find ways to grab sections of songs. Let's just get in there. And take, let's just set this to C1. C3 actually, that's where I'm at. And I'll just make it one note. And C, this one It's going to be, let's put D, because I just want to be in the white notes here. So back then you had pads you can assign samples to, right? Now I don't have pads, although I could actually use my pads on the keyboard if it's working. Yeah, there you go. So now I can go. This just needs a better start point. Right, then I just make just a selection of pieces. And typically 3 or 4 is plenty. But this is how chopping in the hip hop way was done. Just play differently with drum pads instead. But I'm doing it without spending 2-3 grand on an external sampler because Ableton is my sampler. I just got to find another point here. Let's zoom out, find another section. Ooh. Does that make sense? So this is how those fancy machines did it. It's the same ethos. It's just not as attractive, I suppose, because this thing looks cool. But I can do the exact same thing in the box here. And if I had drum pads that were working, so you know, a typical MIDI controller with drum pads, I can play it the same way. Because all you're doing is you're assigning it to notes. So if you want to make it exactly like an MPC or a SP1200, then just get a MIDI controller that works, play the drum triggers, and assign these notes to those triggers. And then that's how you do those chops. It's exactly what they did back in the day. Cool? Any questions before we leave? Cool. No worries. All right, next week, the final lesson, we'll talk about the future, some new techniques. We'll talk about granular synthesis, physical modeling, and how to use that stuff inside Ableton, because Ableton's got it too. So some fresh, very contemporary techniques coming up. Okay? All right, people. All right, I'll take my leave. You enjoy the rest of your week, okay? Okay. See ya. Bye-bye.